during this presentation today. Again, please feel free to put all your questions in the chat so that we can answer them as they come into your minds. Today's program will be recorded and this will be posted on the Brown Schools Open Classroom website. And today we'll be presenting on investing in the next generation, early childhood education to shape the future workforce. I am Nicole Strombaum. I am the pre-doctoral fellow at the Clark Fox Policy Institute, and we have an esteemed panel of speakers for you today. Our speakers include Casey Hanson, the Deputy Director of Kids Win Missouri, Paula-Breonne Vickers, the Director of Early Childhood Power Building at WePower, Chiffontae Ross, Washington University in St. Louis staff and parent advocate, Deanna Finch, the Executive Director of United for Children, and Ellicia Lanier, who is our current Policy Institute Scholar in Residence for the Clark Fox Policy Institute, and the Executive Director of Urban Sprouts Child Development Center. Please give everyone a warm welcome and be excited for this great panel. I'm now going to hand this off to Ellicia, who will be moderating for us today.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. We are so grateful to have you with us, and I am excited to talk about what I love and what the folks on this webinar love so much, which is our region's children and the connection to early childhood in the workforce. Today, while we are together, we have a few goals in mind. We will be highlighting the importance of access to quality, affordable childcare for children, families, and the economy. We will also highlight ways for people to advocate for access to quality and affordable childcare. If you have any questions during this time, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we hope to be able to answer them after we've heard from our esteemed panelists. So today I'd like to pose a question to all of our panelists. And that first question, I think I will pose to Paula. What drew you into getting involved in childcare access?
Yeah, hi everyone. So what drew me was becoming a mom. I never really had to think about early childhood because I was a child that was watched by my grandmother. But when I had my first son at the height of the pandemic, and we all knew what those wait lists became, they became frozen forever lists. I started paying a little bit more attention to what it meant for families to have access to childcare. And then what also drew me is that I was working in the K-12 space and seeing the children that came back after our schools were shut down because of COVID. When they came in and they had never been in any space, seeing the kindergartners who really were not prepared to be in that space at all, and what it meant for the teachers who were trying to play catch up for skills, like something as simple as like holding scissors that parents don't think about teaching. That was the final push of like, okay, my children need this, and then all of our children needed to have the best opportunities starting in kindergarten.
Thank you so much for that, Paula. We absolutely appreciate having parent voice, and many of us share that same why as to what drew us to early childhood. I'd like to now hear from a parent and an esteemed colleague, Chiffontae Ross.
Hi, Ellicia. Thank you so much. So your question was, what drew me to quality childhood access? And I would definitely say I was working for parents as teachers when I became an auntie. And so my son was born later, but when I became an auntie, I became very, very, very aware of what my sister would need to do as far as what list she would need to join and what she should be looking for. And the books say this and the experts say that. And just because you know it doesn't mean you have access to it automatically. And so I got my feet into it real quick, but learning, what he would need and what she would have access to based on her address, based on her income, based on, all of those different factors was really how I was drawn to early childhood education.
I think I live at that intersection of being an auntie. I call myself St. Louis's auntie because I have the pleasure of raising others' children. So even the village is required to lean in and to be a part of this, solution for us all as we think about what does ECE mean for our region? So thank you so much for your why, Chiffontae. And up next, we will hear from another one of my esteemed colleagues, Deanna Finch.
Thank you. I stumbled onto the childcare industry. I am a mom. He's 25 now. But when he was young, I was also young. I was a single, poor mom who had no idea what questions to ask of his educators, of what resources were available to him. He had challenges, ADHD specifically, and being a young undereducated mom during that time, I did not know what I didn't know, but I stumbled on United for Children through relationship building and became a board member first. And I fell in love with the organization and all of the reasons why United for Children existed. And it really connected the dots for me as I was reconciling my own childhood trauma, my child's trauma, and upbringing and educational challenges. It connected the dots for me of how important the intersection of childcare is to all the challenges and the promises that we can provide for our children and our future. And so I decided to hop the road from for-profit to nonprofit work and dedicate my life to bringing awareness to the amazingness of childcare, not just the challenges, but how amazing childcare providers truly can and would do buff the trauma that children experience. And I want to be a part of that. And I want to learn. I've been with United for Children for a total of 10 years now, and I don't know enough. And that is where I'm going to continue working, is learning and spreading awareness, not just for people who have kids who need childcare, not just childcare providers. This subject impacts our whole entire society, and I want to continue to be a part of that. Thank you.
Deanna, thank you for sharing that and for your work in ensuring that childcare providers and parents and children have supports in so that we can support the workforce. So thank you for your why. Our next colleague that we'll hear from today is Casey Hanson with Kids Win.
Hi, I'm Casey Hanson with Kids Win Missouri. I actually started in the ECE space as a part-time employee when I was in college, working in a childcare program, and then also volunteering in Head Start. And I ended up doing some undergraduate research in Head Start. So that's when I really learned a lot about why ECE was so important for children and why it was important for us, not only as, individuals, but as a society, to focus on investing in our children during their earliest years. And so I went on, I had kind of a career working on some campaigns and then working for the legislature. And I really kept coming back to my education and wanting to work on issues that impacted kids and families. And so I did a bit of work with the Missouri After School Network and then landed at Kids Win 5 years ago. 6 years ago, I also became a parent for the first time, and I have 2 children. And so then really navigating the system from that lens allowed me to see some of the struggles that our parents face, just being able to find affordable and accessible childcare that meets their needs. And so taking all of that into work every day and trying to build a system in the state of Missouri that supports children and families of all types in finding the care and the access to early education that meets their needs.
Thank you so much for your why. And Casey, while I have you, can you kind of talk a little bit about what the term quality childcare refers to, or what does it look like? I know we use that oftentimes to describe what we think is what's best for children or what's developmentally appropriate. But can you give us an idea of how you define quality care and education?
Yeah, I mean, I think To one of your points, quality childcare can look a lot of different ways to meet the needs of children and family, but there are some baseline things related to health and safety of children, first and foremost. Probably most importantly, though, the interactions between children and staff are one of the most important aspects of running a high quality program, regardless of setting. So whether that's home-based or center-based, making sure that you have a highly qualified and educated staff really focused on those child and teacher interactions. And then I think, in the state of Missouri, we have started implementing QAR as kind of a program that can put providers on a path to quality that looks at all of those different things across domains of how their environment and the health and safety aspects and the child interaction aspects, and gives us kind of a framework through which to view quality. But there's not one, I guess, answer to your question. And I think that continues to be a discussion that we're having at this state. But those are kind of the key things across all the environments that we're talking about when we're talking quality.
Thank you so much, Casey. And, I just, to your point, we are still as a state determining what our quality rating system will be. We have not concretely defined that. And so as we're on this journey and discovering that, perhaps I'll hear from Deanna Finch, who I know you work with providers to attain things like accreditation, and to look towards certain things that can measure quality. Can you talk a little bit about what quality means to you from a early childhood support agency, and how you all are helping folks to define quality through your work?
Sure. I think that the idea of quality and the activities that get us to quality was really set with the Perry Preschool project. I know that there are variables that were in that research project that we still have to address. But what came out of that study is when children receive high quality early childcare learning experiences, and that means they get full-time, reliable, continuous, inclusive care during parent work hours. There is a strong relationship between the child care providers and their parents, their families. So families are also learning and engaging and being educated on their child's development and opportunities as well. Children have access to screenings at an early age before kindergarten. When they enter into kindergarten or first grade, with those screenings completed, or some of those screenings completed already, parents and educators understand how to meet their needs best. There's resources for health and well-being, nutritious meals and snacks. There's social emotional development and skill building before kindergarten. There are transitions of understanding how to transition from preschool to elementary school. And all of that comes with highly educated and trained educators. I don't believe that means every educator needs to have a master's degree or even a bachelor's degree, that they understand the needs of the family and the child in their care, and they are able to address them with support.
Thank you so much for that. Deanna, you spoke a lot about a parent and navigating early childhood as a parent. I know Paula talked about, quality being hard to find and sitting on wait lists. I know here at Urban Sprouts, we have a wait list of over 450 children. So finding quality childcare can be inaccessible for many families. You also touched a little bit on parents as teachers and how they have this mantra, and we happen to be, the home of parents as teachers. And we support that mantra that, parents are children's first and best teacher. So maybe we'll hear next from a parent on how do you navigate this word quality, Chiffontae, and, what does it mean to you as a parent who is advocating for children to be able to enter quality care and education.
Yeah, so that, I was looking down at the bottom of the screen when she was talking. I was like, they need to add a snap reaction because, yes, that is exactly how I was feeling. I would say, as heartbreaking as it sounds, when, my son was born in 2020, first year of the pandemic. Schools were doing what they could, the ones who were open. And thankfully, I kept him home. I worked him home until he was 10 months old. But even when it happened, and I was the prepared parent, okay? I joined multiple wait lists when I started my second trimester. When we hit the safe zone, I joined those wait lists. I was like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And so by 2021, by around October, I really started calling out like, hey, I got to be in the office. What's going on? Can I get on? And no, I couldn't. There were only a handful of places where we could. And Dad and I went in and we would tour places, and we recognized that quality was one of the first things we had to give up. And it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. Again, me coming from this parents as teachers model, understanding what quality meant. Again, I'm not saying you have to have everything, but quality and having people understand what my 10 months old and everybody else's babies who were in there understand what the developmental domains were. Like, if I could teach my partner about that, how come the people in this building don't know? And I'm talking about directors not knowing what the developmental domains were. Not knowing that like partnering with me is a good thing. Not understanding the importance of low teacher turnover and staff retention. And I understand also that some of those things go way beyond them, right? Like, they don't have the power to change all those things, and that these centers can be funded very differently. But I was able to see very quickly that with fewer options, even with a decent income, with fewer options, you're going to skip out on many things. And for us, the first thing that we noticed was quality. And to know what is missing and to not be able to change that circumstance when I am responsible for his well-being, and by him, I mean my baby, was heartbreaking because I know what this is supposed to be like. I know the possibilities. I know the wait list I was on, and I know I don't wait list long. But to know that he wouldn't be getting that, and to recognize that I'd be at work at a new job, doing all these things and still having to check in and say, like, hey, how's this going? How's that going? Or telling them that he wasn't sleeping well. We'll just put a TV in his room. Y'all, he was 1. And so even those little glimpses into the understanding or the misinformation around his development, I thought, okay, this isn't going to be the right place, because they're understanding and they're fighting against me on safety things, on whether or not he should be turned forward in the car seat, all not putting it, when I would leave his car seat at school, I would come back and his coat would be on in his car seat, and we would argue back and forth about those sorts of things. We don't all have to know everything at every time, but we do have to discuss. We do have to discuss progress. We do have to discuss the quality. We do have to talk about why things are the way they are, why recommendations are what they are. This isn't babysitting. And even if it were, this isn't babysitting. And I do think that the centers that we toured, and I'll wrap this up, I do think that there's oftentimes a bias of low expectation. Well, it's over here in this side of town, or this is who's there. So there's this bias of low expectation. But I like what Casey said about the path towards progress, the path towards good quality. Everybody can be on a path. Everybody can learn something. And there's this bias of low expectation that keeps many of our children from learning and growing and being what Paula said, which is ready for kindergarten. So that's my answer.
Thank you so much for that, Chiffontae, because I think that what I hear you saying is that quality still is something that we're striving for the region, and it's something that I know is possible. So as we reimagine this early childhood system, we reimagine a system that has a QRA that can help us to get towards quality, to help providers to lead to that path, and that there's a deep investment, right? Because even quality costs, right? And who does the burden fall on? Does it fall on providers, parents? Where does that fall? And how do we take shared ownership of such quality? I want to hear from one more person, because what I loved about what you said is that it's almost as if your experience has shifted you into parent advocacy. So I'd like to hear from Paula, who supports parents who, like Chiffontae, who are leaning into their voice and wanting to be involved in advocacy and shaping how the region that their child is growing up in, and how the places in which parents are tasked with leaving their children are moving towards a position of quality by policy change and advocacy. So Paula, can we hear from you around, what does the term quality childcare mean to you?
All right, so I'm about to contradict myself a little bit, because, and this is where it's sometimes I say this is Paula the mom talking, or Paula the employee, or all these different hats we're wearing. So like Chiffontae, when I was on wait list, I did explore and navigate a couple of spaces, and there was one in particular where the space was so intentional about teaching them to grow up. So she was upset with me because he was 2 and not potty trained, and he was learning to count and do all these things that are like, oh great, kindergarten readiness. And so in a lot of ways, if you're looking only at kindergarten readiness, then by quality standards, that would have been it. But it was in that moment, one day, where she was telling me he was having some really bad tantrums, so she had him in timeout most of the day. And I was like, okay, let me have a reflection, a talk to Paula, a talk to Jesus, talk to everybody of what do I actually need from a space that I'm leaving my child in. And so quality, as Casey said, it's gonna look different. It's gonna look different. It's gonna look different for the people that are higher up and doing the deciding of what that actually looks like on paper. It's going to look different from the physical standpoints of making sure children are safe and stairs are blocked off, all these things. But for me, as a mom that drops my 2 children off every day, the quality that I was looking at was one, and it sounds so corny, but follow with me, is literally the cuddles. And so when my children first started in this space, now both of my children have been lucky enough to have a teacher named Miss Brene twice. Both of my children immediately go in the classroom, say bye to me, and they go and hug Miss Brene. Before they do anything else, they go and they get in her arms. And my littlest one, he really milks it. He leans in and leans all over it. And that level of cuddles of I know when I leave my child there, she's just as invested in what happens to him as I am. There was a video a couple weeks ago where they did a rally for him, and someone messaged, they didn't know me. They were like, which one's the mom? Because the teacher was more amped than I was. Miss Brene was more amped than I was. So that first point of quality of are my children being nurtured? Because these are babies. These are 0 to 5. Those are babies. They deserve to be nurtured. And then looking at the confidence that they come out with. Because for me, recognizing as they're developing this confidence, they may not know all the answers before kindergarten, but they're going to be confident enough to ask the questions. They're going to be confident enough to be lifelong learners. They're not going to sit in the classroom and be afraid to raise their hand and ask for help, because they're confident. Because these kids, baby, they are quick to tell you what they don't like, and they are quick to tell you when they need help. And I'm recognizing that's not true for every space. So for me, that's what quality looks like. One, the cuddles or the comfort that my children have in being in that space, where sometimes I have to literally pull them out, and then the confidence that they're walking away with. So when I'm seeing them try new things, I don't have to cheer them on as much. And that was something where when I was in the K-12 space, it would be really heartbreaking to hear kindergartners, first graders, second graders say, I can't do it, and never tried. And it's okay, so that's, for me, that's what quality is. I want my children to be okay with not having things be perfect. I want them to be okay with, I'm gonna be loud and wrong, but I'm gonna be confident enough to try. So the cuddles and confidence, that's Paula the mom answer. Paula the employee answer is we are working to determine what quality looks like.
Thank you. That was really good. Thank you all for answering that question. We heard a lot around just like quality from how we're measuring quality from like what the space is and how centers can offer the hours and the support to parents. And we heard from like what quality doesn't look like and how parents want to be involved in what that looks like. And we heard about what it sounds like to me is secure attachment. And I will lean in with that. I believe quality really starts with understanding that this is a neuroscience and we can break a baby. And I tell people very simply, my judge is easy. And everybody at my school calls me Miss TT. I grew up in a community where everyone was involved in how you were raised. And so from the time you got outside on the porch to the time you came home at night, it didn't matter who saw you, they were involved in how you were being raised and you were accountable to that village. And so here at Urban Sprouts, we believe that continuity of care, trust, and reliable relationships is what quality care and education is built upon. It gives the adult an opportunity to walk out these doors, go do their job, and come back and knowing that their child is safe and well cared for. And then we can layer in the education and the other things that come with it. But knowing that this person from the time that they're born is capable of developing attachment, is capable of learning, capable of navigating, capable of negotiating, capable of living out the life's possibilities is just a joy and why I stay in this field. So I think we're going to take a little bit of a shift. We're going to spend about the next 20 minutes. So panelists, you only have about 3 or 4 minutes to kind of get your time in, but we're going to allow each person to talk about their work and what it is that they do and how their work or what they or how they are showing up in the system is impacting the system. So I think we will start with the statewide work. And then we'll end up bringing it on home right before we get to the question and answer period. So I'd like to start off with Casey Hanson with Kids Win Missouri. Will you tell us what it is that you do every day, how Kids Win is working here in this early childhood ecosystem, and what folks need to know about your organization to either be involved or to share with someone that they know who'd like to be involved?
Absolutely. So we are a statewide policy and advocacy coalition working on issues that impact children and families, and that's primarily through advocacy at the state level, both legislative advocacy, but really a lot of administrative advocacy as well at the state level. So the big buckets of work that we focus on, early childhood is one of them. We also do work in the children's health and mental health space and in the child welfare space. But within our early childhood work, we work on childcare, pre-K, and access to home visiting as well. So kind of all of those policies that really impact children and families 0 to 5. Within childcare right now, there's quite a bit going on. It has been an industry, a field that was very shaky ahead of the pandemic. And then once the pandemic happened, it really blew open a lot of the challenges that the industry has been feeling for a long time. But the pandemic really exposed a lot of that. So, you know, the workforce, there's challenges recruiting and retaining a workforce. The jobs are traditionally very low paid for those that work in the space. And then parents can only afford to spend so much on childcare. And especially within the St. Louis region, but statewide, the percentage that the average family is spending on childcare is, you know, much higher than, I guess, what's kind of seen as the gold standard, that 7% of their income. So there's a real big funding gap in the space. And so that's a lot of what our focus has been on at the state level for the past couple of years. We have reaped the benefits of federal relief dollars over the last couple of years, almost $1 billion invested into Missouri to stabilize childcare and hopefully preserve and then work on some of those things like recruiting people into the field. But that money is going away pretty quickly. Here in just a couple of months, we'll kind of run out of that federal money. So there's a really big gap to fill there. We've worked a lot the past year trying to get more state investment into supporting higher rates for childcare workers, supporting higher eligibility levels for families to be able to access subsidized childcare and funding for pre-K as well. There are a lot of systemic challenges at the state level as well. So when I talked about administrative advocacy, a lot of our work focuses on that. A couple of years ago in 2021, Governor Parson consolidated early education programs from across 3 state departments into one Office of Childhood that sits within the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and they oversee now childcare, home visiting, and pre-K. From a high level, that is something we supported, and we like having governance of these programs kind of consolidated. However, there are obviously challenges with bringing 3 state departments together, new leadership, all of those things. And at the same time, dealing with this massive influx of federal funding that the state didn't necessarily have the administrative capacity to administer at the same time. So there's been a lot of positives with that federal money, access to PPP loans, retention and recruitment grants, other things to help sustain subsidy operations. But there have also been challenges just with getting that money out the door and really deploying it in a way to help providers. So those are some of the things that we're working on. The Senate is under a constitutional deadline to pass the budget by tomorrow at 6 p.m. And they have just finally this morning taken up the first budget bill. So it is unclear right now if they're going to make that constitutional deadline, in which case we will be in a special session over the state budget. And so I don't necessarily have anything to report as an outcome from that. We are hopeful that what it is looking like is there will be another rate increase for childcare providers that was proposed by Governor Parson, and leadership in both the House and the Senate have agreed to. It is a bit unclear at this point, though, how that will be paid for, if it will be paid for by federal dollars that will go away next year, or if it will be paid for through general revenue. So that's where we're at with some of this. There's a bit of a mixed bag of good and bad happening in the state right now. Am I sharing ways to get involved now, Ellicia, or are we coming back?
We can come back to that, or
Okay.
you know what, since we have you,
Yeah.
we can take a minute to talk about that.
Yeah, so we would love for you to get involved in our work. A couple of things, signing up for our email list, which I'll share. We do send out weekly updates during legislative session on all the bills and issues that we're tracking. And we also host a weekly legislative update call where we talk about all of the issues impacting kids and some of the big ticket issues just happening in Jefferson City during session. So those are a really good opportunity if you want to plug in, follow along to what's going on and kind of stay on top of some of these issues. We invite you to join us there. In the summer and winter, we also do monthly calls in between when session is out, just to kind of keep folks up to date on what's happening in the space as well. And then right now, we actually do have an action alert that I'll share related to this state is currently making some, developing their 3-year plan for how they will spend their federal childcare funds. It's called the Childcare Development Fund State Plan. And so there is a public comment period happening now, and we have developed some template comments that we developed in coalition with our partners, parents, providers from around the state. And so I will share that form as well, and we invite you to participate in that if you're looking for a way that you can take action now to help support access to more affordable childcare in Missouri.
Thank you so much, Casey. I think I'll pass it on to Paula-Breonne with WePower. Got about 3 minutes to tell us what you do and ways in which we can get involved.
So we do it all. One of the things that I'm most proud of that we do, and really what brought me to WePower, and also a way to get involved, is the Power and Policy Action Group. So in sharing my story, I said that not having access to childcare brought me to this space. So the Power and Policy Action Group looks to activate parents, providers, community members, really to become advocates for their children, advocates for their teachers, advocates for all the spaces that our babies are in. So it was at this meeting, I was looking around trying to find really a community, to see if a community exists to talk about the struggles that I was having. And I happened upon the Power and Policy Action Group. I started attending meetings, and it was truly life-changing to hear someone ask the question of like, how do you heal spaces from like not being in great spaces, or what does this look like to like start learning how to advocate? You first surround yourself with people that have been doing it, because it's uncomfortable. There's learning that we as adults and we as parents have to do as well. And the Power and Policy Action Group really served as that for me. So we meet on the first Wednesday of the month, every month at Urban Sprouts at 6:30. The kicker that really got me was that we provide childcare and dinner, so people can come straight after work. But the Power and Policy Action Group also looks to move forward the plans of the playbook. So the playbook was established in 2019 to look at how do we solve for the crisis of childcare in St. Louis specifically. So St. Louis City and St. Louis County. And looking at how we explore this. So this included community listening sessions, experts that were doing research, community sessions to vote on what the focuses will be. The outcome was quality, so addressing that, addressing funding and access, addressing governance and coordination, addressing family well-being, and addressing the workforce. So the Power and Policy Action Group has won a little bit over $9 million to support these spaces, some which have been paid out, some which have not, and they are going to continue hearing from us. And that's another thing that we as WePower do, is we lean into those uncomfortable conversations, because we know that this work is underfunded or not funded at all. And when that happens, when there's conversations about money, people get uneasy, and someone has to be uneasy for them. So we lean in, we pull together, we organize, we activate, and we also do all the things and all the responses needed to make sure our children are well in the area of St. Louis.
Thank you so much for that, Paula. I think I'll hear from our parent next, Chiffontae. If you want to talk a little bit about your parent advocacy role.
Yeah, so I am on this call as a parent advocate, and I worked with WePower first and did a fellowship with them, which was very eye-opening and very instrumental in my understanding of what power building was. And last year I actually started a fellowship with Kids Win Missouri, and that as well has been great. I've done a lot of hands-on learning in Jefferson City and with other providers and organizations like the core partners here in St. Louis. And that has been really instrumental in me sort of not just finding my voice, but fine-tuning it and speaking it in rooms, like speaking truth to power, essentially. How do I advocate not just for my child, but for other children? And St. Louis's and Missouri's extremely diverse communities. Like, what does access to quality and affordable childcare look like? What are our goals for it? So really being in the space with Kids Win Missouri has been great for that. I really didn't have any understanding of what childcare access looked like in places like Moberly, Missouri, but now I do. I recognize some of the differences in between my child and their access, but also a lot of the similarities. And so that's been really, really instrumental in my understanding.
Thank you for that. We appreciate your advocacy And I just love to hear the parents that get involved and are, wanting more for children that are coming behind our children. So it's really near and dear to my heart. Okay, last but not least, we'll hear from Deanna Finch around what it is that U4C is up to and ways in which you can get involved in their work as well.
Thank you. So we started in 1969. We've been around for a long time. Starting out as Child Daycare Association, and we were the resource and referral organization in the St. Louis region, created networks across the state that turned into the state-funded child care resource and referral work. United for Children is leading again the early care and education resource and referral work across the state, and it's reimagined differently than it has been before. And I'm going to get my slides up because my information up, because I will mess it up if I'm not paying if I'm just doing it off the cuff here. So there's a few components in the early care and education resource and referral work. There's resource and referral. So you can call, any parent can call United for Children, and we can help you find childcare that best fits your needs. And then also, it's not just about finding childcare, it's also finding what other resources you need as a parent or as a family member or even as a childcare provider. So where in the past it's always been about finding childcare, it's all about the holistic nurturing development of a child. And we are building a statewide database that includes all the resources in the regions. And we do that through the Community Leader Initiative. United for Children is leading and building the capacity of stakeholders across the state called Missouri's Childhood Community Leaders. And they are on the ground working either with childcare providers or with service agencies that impact a child's life, and really learning about what strengths are in their regions, what gaps are in their regions, and informing their plans for their region. And it just got started again. Last June is when we were awarded that contract, and we are moving into the second year of a reimagined resource and referral system. But the St. Louis group is led by Turn the Page St. Louis, or Turn the Page STL, and also UMSL. And that is an area where you can join as an interested citizen to learn more of what's happening in the childcare industry, what's happening here specifically in the St. Louis region, and also find ways that you can support the many efforts that are happening in the region. So the childcare, the Community Leader Initiative is not leading all the strategies in the region. It is collecting and connecting all the information that it is happening. So you have WePower, you have the Gateway Early Childhood Alliance, you have the St. Louis Crisis Nursery, all the different services that are touching a child's and family's life are all coming together under one roof to know what is happening here, how can we impact it. A couple of priorities that they're talking about currently is how to just streamline communication of all the things that are happening, all the resources that are available, communication from the state to our childcare providers and our families. How can we streamline that and make that easier to digest for families and childcare providers? And also, how do we streamline the funding opportunities? If you go and click on a page, the funding opportunities for the state, there are a lot of different opportunities, but they may not fit everyone's needs, but it's not really clear. So the community leaders in this region is working on that to help communicate better in the region, coordinate services. So that is what you can do. You can also go to United for Children's website. We have a lot of things going on. We have the resource and referral work that we're doing, and then also we have coaches who are in the classrooms with the educators, helping improve their quality and learning, helping them getting their CDAs, their certifications, accreditation. So it is a both and, helping build quality through educating the classrooms, the directors and the teachers, but also helping families know where quality childcare is. Families can ask the childcare centers, what type of professional development are you involved in and engaged in? So there's all sorts of questions. I think someone asked, Taryn, I think was asking about how do we find childcare for foster families. Call United for Children. We have a statewide database that can guide you to a few different places that may fit your needs. I hope I answered the question. I probably didn't.
Yes, you did. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to thank you all so much for your wisdom, your insight, your commitment to our children, the region, and what is on the horizon, and what what we're anxiously waiting on, Casey, today. Just all the changes, all the possibilities, and I appreciate the time that you all spent, really diving into like why you're here. I think for the next 15 minutes, or actually we have a little short of 15, for the next couple minutes, we'll lean into our questions in the chat. So if you have a question and you've not added it, please add it now. And Stephanie will be helping us to direct some of those questions to some of the panelists.
So the first question that I've seen in the chat that I think we would want to address a little bit more is, how can repairs occur for the families that did not have access to quality early childhood care and education, especially during those pandemic years? I think several of us on the panel are moms and had kids during those years. I have a 2.5-year-old and a 6-month-old. So I know that, early on it was really difficult with the closure of childcare facilities, and just even finding a place to send our child. So anybody want to address that on the panel? That would be a great place to start.
I will, and I'll probably tag team Chiffontae. So I think the biggest thing is find your village. So Ellicia talked about village and the importance of it. So like literal, find your mom friends, find your parent friends, find your friends that have either navigated it before or navigating as well. Because there is healing that comes in conversation. There's healing that comes in like being affirmed of like, should my child be being put in timeout? No? Okay, so I'm not tripping. I'm going to do something about it. And then like actively take action or plan action steps and take action steps. So very early on, I used to be very anxious as a mom, very afraid as a mom. And then like it was one day of like living and holding the anxiety and fear in my body that I was finally like, you know what? I'm going to stop being anxious and afraid, because I've just decided if someone does something to my child, then they're going to have to answer to me, and not like extremes of like, whatever that means. If someone yells at my child too much, they're going to have to answer to me. And so once I made that decision, that's who I decided to start showing up as. The last thing I would say is start leaning into the community of the people that are doing the work, start attending meetings, because there's so much learning that comes in that space. So when I first started being interested in early childhood, the first thing I did, and it was so random at the time, but it really shaped and shifted my career change, was I did a fellowship with PBS. And I think one of my first conversations, I accidentally ended up with my baby in the interview for the fellowship. And Alex Stallings, she was just like very okay with everything being like child focused. And like, I'm like, okay, so these people exist, like these safe spaces, these quality spaces, they do exist. And then from there, every step after that was like, I know it exists, and now I'm not going to settle. So like, we know better, we do better, we lean in, we learn. And then we also decide like, they are going to have to hear from me. Once you get in those quality spaces, be active, support those spaces so they can stay quality. Because someone said earlier, I read it in the chat maybe, that a lot of the conversation around quality also has to do with funding. And so like, start being the cheerleader for your children's school, start being the cheerleader for this work, because as quickly as a space can be great, we know that centers and spaces are closing every day. So we have to get it and protect it, because it's where our children are.
I can definitely piggyback off of that and finding your community being a huge part of getting involved. And I will say also, I recognize that as a person who is able to, sort of foster my community and get out and go to PPAG meetings, I'm invited to those as well every month. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Mackenzie Grayson. But also, when you're not able to, even leaning into doctor's appointments, leaning into the quick chat that the teachers want to have with you after school. Because one of the initial questions with this is what happened. I think the initial question was, what happens to those people who didn't have access to it during the pandemic, right? Well, those children are growing up. Many of those kids are no longer in their early childhood space anymore, right? So this now includes the K through 12 space. So what does it look like to reach into those spaces as well? Or what does it look like for those administrators when we know that those kids did not get access to quality childhood, centers before they got to them? So for those parents, like Paula said, leaning into community, really letting your guard down around where you think your child should be versus everybody else's child. There is so much shame pent up in that, whether it be, shame that existed from family members or community members or social media or whatever, like this is what my child should be doing. There's a lot of shame in expectation and isolation. And so I do think that groups matter for that matter. Groups are really important. Whether that be, a play date here or there, or y'all just you at work talking with a friend or a coworker about, where your children are and what they're doing, asking questions, letting your guard down, and really, like Paula said as well, being your child's best advocate. I want to partner with anybody and everybody who has my child's and any child's best, life in mind. The minute I see you don't, I'm supposed to be there to guard him. Period. And I'm going to guard that for any child, just like I know where he is right now, around the corner at a child care center, because he is in a quality center now. They would do the exact same. So I'm partnering with them, and I'll partner with anybody who's looking out for the family well-being, the quality of life for a child. But the minute I see you're not, whether that be you have inappropriate age expectations for a child and you are punishing a child for that, for those reasons, or we don't have a similar care ethic or care politic, right? Now we adversaries. And I make no qualms about it. There is no ifs, ands, and buts about it. They only get this one childhood, and we get so many chances to get it right, but what I'm doing is my child's childhood. And it's not his job to be growing up. I'm not growing up a person. I'm growing up a man. I'm raising a child. I have a child. It's his job to be a child. So it's my job to create community for him and for myself.
I think I want to move on to another question that we haven't addressed in the chat. What role do panelists think corporations, including higher education institutions, should play in addressing the affordability and accessibility of childcare? Again, open to any panelist.
I would like to talk about this, but Casey, I see you in the chat too. If you have anything to add, anyone, but the economic impact to Missouri, to actually the whole entire country, but just in Missouri is almost $2 billion. $2 billion loss of productivity, of economic gains because of the lack of consistent, affordable childcare in Missouri. And businesses have to get into the conversation. This is impacting their business. This is impacting their working families. Regardless of whether there's a tax credit available to them, if they want to invest in their business, invest in their employees, they need to look at childcare support as a EAP, right? It's an employer benefit to their workers. That's the least that they could be doing, is asking what do their working families need to be able to come to work every day and feel confident that their children are taken care of so that they don't have to leave early. There is, since COVID, a huge rise of especially females being dismissed from work because of the lack of childcare. Moms are being fired at a higher rate these days because of the lack of childcare. And this is an economic impact to all of this. Imagine what we could do in Missouri with $2 billion if we were investing in our childcare the way it needs to be invested. So I absolutely believe that those who have the means and resources and assets to be able to really reinvest into their families, specifically around childcare, is going to make a huge difference.
I would just say, I think we've made great progress at the state advocacy level, getting, for instance, the Missouri Chamber involved this year, and they were a huge champion for the childcare tax credits. But that's in part because they're hearing from their membership. 90% of CEOs on their survey this year said that childcare was a top issue for their families. And so I do think we are seeing kind of like business establishment getting more involved, which I think will be helpful on the policy front. I'll also share, we are doing some community level work within different communities around the state. And, you know, each community has developed a community team with leadership that includes at the community level, school, private childcare, parents, Head Start, and the business community. And so these communities are kind of doing a deep dive into their data at the community level and identifying what priorities they want to work on as a community in terms of addressing their childcare challenges. And so that's one way that we're trying to work at a more local or regionalized level to get business voices at the table to really be thinking about solutions that they can be engaged in. And I think we're hopeful by investing in that work in communities throughout the state, we can also pilot some solutions at these local levels to then hopefully scale at the state level and potentially get state funding to support. So we are trying to do some real-time experimentation on like, how do we get the business community more involved and make it easier for them to participate so that they want to help be part of the solution for these issues.
This is Paula, the mom's answer to this is I feel like businesses should invest funds, but not necessarily take up space at the table. And I say that because the people that have been doing this work around early childhood education, the leaders of these centers, the leaders of these spaces, they are the experts. And I think sometimes there are spaces that only value experts based on extra credentials or if they have a PhD or not. And there's a lived experience in these spaces that already exist. And what Paula the mom wants to be really mindful of is that these are not spaces that need to be run like businesses that are like for profit. Like, how do we make everything a number and how do we get this and get that? Like, these are still babies. So there are experts that have been doing this work that have not been funded because most of them are also women. So put the funding in, recognizing that your employees are benefiting from this space, but maybe not needing to take up space at the table.
I would just like to see them show up to the conversations that are happening. I think this is probably my fourth public conversation this year already, really targeted. Our hope is to bring business folks to understand the challenges in this industry so that can support advocacy around it and we haven't seen many show up. So I definitely don't want them to take up space and start directing what we should be doing or what childcare should be doing, but showing up and learning and being a part of that conversation. I all for it.
We had a great discussion today with these amazing panelists who are all very, very invested in our children. And I am just so thankful that they gave us their time and were able to come. We had over 100 participants in this conversation today, which is incredible. I would just like to share that the third policy brief on family-friendly business policies is now posted. It is all about children. It is all about that next generation. And that's available on the Clark Fox website. And I'd like to share just a couple QR codes with you. If you want to read this new policy brief, there's a QR code for that. And you can sign up for our next open classrooms or watch this recording using that second QR code. Thank you all so, so much for attending today. I am just so thankful that you partook in this. And if a panelist has not already put in their contact information and wants to put in their contact information into the chat, please feel free to do so. I saw that many of you already did. Again, I'll leave this open for a few extra minutes just so people can get the information that they need from that chat. There are very many links, all great information shared today. So give you some time to copy what you need.